Today we are making gumbo, and I'm peeling potatoes to make the potato salad to go with it, because the gumbo that I make always comes with potato salad, and you serve the potato salad in the bowl with the gumbo. So what we're making is something called Gumbo YaYa, and the word gumbo itself actually means okra. But the gumbo here in the South has come to mean a lot of different things, but it's a mixture of everything in one pot. So whatever you have is what you can use, but it starts with a very familiar base. So I'm going to go ahead and get the potatoes peeled and cut and on, and then we'll start our base for our gumbo. Our potatoes are all chopped. We're going to get them in some cold water on the stove and boil them for about 5 to 10 minutes. You're going to check for softness, but they need to come to a really good boil before you start timing them. Salt the water really well. It's your only chance to get flavor into those potatoes. Salt the water and let them cook. And in the meantime, we're going to get everything else ready for our pot. So we need garlic, we need onions, we need bell peppers, and we need celery. All of these things build our base for any gumbo that you're going to make. When we start to build our roux, we're going to put butter and flour in there to build the roux. But for right now, we're using olive oil, and we're going to cook down our garlic. We'll turn that down really low and go ahead and get the rest of our flavors in here. I've already got some celery cut up, so we'll go ahead and add that to the pan. We're going to go ahead and add some bell peppers also and some onion. So I've got some of the bell peppers cut up. We have some different colored bell peppers, the red, the yellow, the orange, just for some color. You could use whatever kind you have. So I'm going to add those in here. Stir that around a little bit and get it going. We want this to cook down just slightly. We don't want it to turn to mush, but we do want them to soften up a little bit before we start building our roux. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut some green bell peppers and some onions to go in there. And I'm just going to do half a green bell pepper, so we're going to cut it in half. We'll pull the seeds out with our hand, just like that. And then we're going to slice it. If you hold it on the back side, it's always easier to slice. The knife goes through it better. If you hold it on this side and try to cut, the knife will slip off and you could cut yourself. So I always recommend holding it with the skin side down. And then once you get it cut into strips, you can turn it sideways and cut it into little chunks. We'll add that into our pan, and then we're going to get the onion going for the pan. All of this is building flavors, and this is a base of a lot of these type of dishes that you have. The Creole dishes, the Cajun dishes, all of those dishes start with these same flavors. So they're very familiar if that's the type of food that you're used to. But if you're not used to it, these flavors are so amazing together. Like I said, it mimics a mirepoix, but they added a little something extra in there, and then we added the garlic also. So we need to get some onions. We're going to cut the ends of the onion off. We're going to cut this whole onion because you want a good bit of onion in there. Cut through that outer layer. We'll peel that edge off. That takes all the outside of the onion off. It makes it easy for us to cut it in half. In half. And then we're going to cut it into strips. And then cut it into chunks. Once you get all of your onion in there and all of your bell pepper, your celery, your garlic, we're going to let that cook down for just a minute, and after it cooks down, I'm going to show you how to make a roux right in the pan with all your veggies and everything in there too. All of our flavors are cooking down in the pan, and now we've got to get some meat in there before we build our roux. Now that's really different than the way a lot of people make a gumbo, but let me tell you, the juice from that meat, when it drips off into that pan, is going to add flavor to our roux. So I'm going to go ahead and get the sausage ready because sausage has a lot of fat in it. We have a local Mississippi sausage here, and it has green onions in it also. You could make your own sausage or you could buy a really nice sausage, but I recommend you look in your area to see what they have that's fresh and local. That's always going to be the best. But I don't particularly like the casing, so what we're going to do is run the knife along the edge of the sausage, and we're going to take that casing off. So once you make a hole, usually you can get in there and peel that outside edge off, just like that. It makes it a little tough on the edge, and it also sometimes makes it seize up on the edges, which I really don't like. So I usually take the casing off. And once you take the casing off, we want to cut these on a strong diagonal because we're going to get a lot of surface area on our sausage. So we're going to cut these at an angle and get them in the pan. Now these are going to cook down with our vegetables, and they're going to render all that fat that's inside the sausage, and that's what we're going to use along with our butter for our roux. The sausage needs to cook down long enough to where it gets a little brown color on it, and it renders down some of the fat in the pan with the vegetables. So we're going to look for some browning on there. Our sausage has browned off nicely in the pan, and we're ready to start building our roux. So you can see that the sausage has got some nice brown color, and it's also got some nice brown color on the pan. But all of that, remember, is called fond, and we want to get that off the bottom of the pan. What we're going to do is we're going to make a little space, and we're going to put our butter right in the center. And I've got half a stick of butter. We're going to put that right in there and let that start melting. Once this gets melted down, we're going to add some flour. And I've got about 1/4 cup of flour here, and this is all-purpose flour. And normally, everybody would take everything out of the pan and put it in a separate bowl to start making their roux. But I like to do the roux with everything in the pan. It just adds flavor, and it makes the roux delicious. So once our butter gets melted, we're going to go ahead and add some flour, and you want to cook the flour down till it's the color of peanut butter. That's what we're looking for. And once it gets to that color, then we can move on to adding our broth. So our butter is just about there. Gumbo is something that's really big here on the coast. It's served in a lot of different families at holidays, Christmas especially. But like I said, it's kind of a long process. This is something you have to make ahead of time and kind of let it sit and marry and then have it the next day. But every family has their secret gumbo recipe. This one is the one that was passed down to me from my stepfather, who was actually a Cajun chef. So this is a really good recipe and has won several awards. So please try it out at home. It looks a little funny the way we do it, but I promise you the flavor is definitely there. So our butter has melted. We're going to add our flour now. Now stir this around. It's going to get kind of thick, kind of funny looking. Once we get that all incorporated, then we're going to let it cook for just a few minutes till it looks like peanut butter. Our flour has thickened up really well, and it's the color of peanut butter. And we want to add a little filet to this. Now this is also different than the way most people make gumbo. They usually add filet at the very end, which I do too, but we also add a little bit of it to the roux. So we're going to sprinkle just a little bit of filet in there and stir this around. Now we're ready to stir everything together, and we're going to start adding our broth. And the broth is going to help us to get all that dark stuff off the bottom of the pan, all the fond, all the flavor. So we've got a chicken broth that we're going to add because we're going to put chicken in this gumbo. You want to add a little bit at a time, and as you add, you want to scrape that bottom and get all of that flavor off and into your gumbo. Now the chicken stock that you use can be one that you make, or you can buy one at the store. They have some really nice ones now. But all the flavor down there is what you want to put into the gumbo, because we don't want to waste all the flavor we built in our pan. So as you're pouring, you want to make sure and get it on the darker spots, and then scrape with your wooden spoon and get all of that up just like that into your sauce. All right, I'm going to keep doing that till we get all this off of the bottom of the pan. The filet that we added Filet is something that's very common in the South. It's something that we use in a lot of different dishes. And filet is actually ground sassafras leaves. So the sassafras grows wild around here, little short bushes close to the ground. You pick the leaves, you dry them and grind them up, and it has a really great flavor. So we added a little filet then, we'll add a little bit more to the very end. We have all the flavors scraped up off the bottom of the pan and into our sauce, and it's making a nice thick sauce. You can see it's getting a beautiful color to it. It's thickening up nicely, and we still need to continue adding broth. Basically, we're going to fill this pot up, and then we're going to add some chicken to it. So let me go ahead and add the rest of the broth in here. You could also use a seafood broth if you have one of those, if you've made a seafood broth. A lot of times when I'm boiling crab or boiling crawfish, I save that broth afterwards. It's great to use in something like this. So this is going to be what they call a Gumbo YaYa, and that means it has everything in it. So it's got the chicken, the sausage, and the seafood. But the seafood comes later at the very end. So the next thing we're going to add is our chicken. And I've got some chicken thighs, and we just cut them up, and all we're going to do is cook them in this broth. So we're just going to dump them in, stir them around. They're going to cook right in here, and they're going to infuse their flavor into the sauce also. And then we need to add two more things. We need to add a little bit of okra, because gumbo itself means okra. Now, okra grows a lot in the South, and we eat this a lot fried, but here we're using it as a thickening agent. It will thicken up the gumbo a little bit. So the filet also thickens up the gumbo. We use both in this particular one, but you want to put the okra in there now so it can go ahead and cook down. And even if you think you don't like okra, try it. So go ahead and stir this around, and this needs to cook for a few more minutes. And the last thing we're going to add is some chopped green onions, and that's going to give us some flavor, also some color. As I've said before, I like to leave the band on the very end to help hold them together. So we're going to use that to hold these, and we're going to cut the other end just into small pieces, and we'll add it to our gumbo as well. The gumbo is going to take about an hour and a half to cook. And we'll get that onto the stove on a medium heat. You want to make sure you check it a lot. You want to make sure that the bottom is not sticking. If it starts to stick any on the bottom, you want to use a nice flat metal spatula to make sure you scrape that bottom and keep it from sticking, because it'll burn in spots if you let it stick. So this is going to cook for about an hour and a half. And while that's cooking, we're going to get our rice on. What I have here is a jasmine rice. Jasmine is a certain grain of rice. It's a little bit longer. It cooks differently than just a regular white rice. This we're going to get on to cook, and then we've got to mix our potato salad up, and it'll all come together about the same time. And at the very end, we're going to add our seafood. Our gumbo has thickened up really nicely, so we need to do a few more things to it until it's completely finished. What we need to do is add a little bit of salt. Now remember, we had salt in the broth that we added, so you want to think about that when you're adding the salt. We're going to do about half a tablespoon of the salt, and this is our seasoned salt with the rosemary and the garlic in there. And we're going to do a full heaping tablespoon of my seasoning blend. That we put in everything that we cook, and it's going to give it a nice flavor. So sprinkle that across the top. Now we need to finish it off with a little bit of pepper. Fresh ground pepper is always best. And then we need to get this moving around just a little bit, and we're going to add our seafood and a little bit more of that filet. So we're going to go ahead and add the oysters in first, and oysters have in it what we call oyster liquor. So that's the juice from the oysters. We want to add that too. That's all flavor. And then our shrimp. These are 21-25 shrimp, and they're already peeled and deveined. You want to make sure you have them peeled and deveined and add them right in, and any juice that they may have as well. Fresh shrimp is always best. If you have to get frozen, you can add the frozen directly into the pot frozen and let them thaw out in the pot. So we need to cook this until the seafood gets done. We're going to add a little bit more of our filet. You can see we have a nice green color going on, and that comes from the filet. Filet, remember, is the sassafras leaves that we ground up, and they add a flavor, but they also help to thicken. So we're going to add a little bit more of that filet and stir that around. And while that's cooking the shrimp and just the oysters just a little, we're going to go ahead and mix up our potato salad. Now in the bowl I have the potatoes that we cooked off, and we have boiled eggs. And we're going to add a few things to this to make our potato salad. I've got regular yellow mustard. We're going to add that in. I've got some chopped onions. And I've got dill pickle relish. Now it has to be dill relish. You don't want sweet relish for this particular recipe. And then we've got a little bit of mayonnaise. We're going to add that in also. About half of this bowl. I'll get the salt and pepper and season this. And then we're going to make our plate. I'm going to stir this around. Our potato salad is done, and now it's time to plate our gumbo. And I want to show you what I mean by serving the potato salad with the gumbo. So we've cooked off our jasmine rice. That cooked for about 15 minutes, and this is the way you build this plate. So you start with the rice right in the center, a nice heaping of the jasmine rice. And then you want to ladle the gumbo right on top of that. And when you're ladling the gumbo, you want to try to get some of everything. The oysters, the shrimp, the sausage, everything that's in the pot. You want to put right down on the top. A little extra juice, just like that. All right, so that juice that we have around the edge there, that's where we want to put our potato salad. I know it sounds kind of funny, but trust me on this. You want to try it with the potato salad in the gumbo, and you want to eat it just like that, the potato salad and the gumbo together in the same bowl. We're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of green onions. We learned how to make the perfect gumbo and potato salad to go along with it.